Hello, my name is Kimberly Dre and this is my sewing class. If you're here today just for this particular content, welcome, glad to have you. Keep in mind, however, that I have organized my channel as a step-by-step sewing course with each concept building upon the ones preceding them. So you may want to start like at the first video and watch through, or you may not. Just keep in mind that a lot of the principles that will be discussed in today's video have been discussed in previous videos, so if you find yourself kind of like, where am I, what am I doing? Then you're either in the twilight zone or you need to watch my previous videos. You will probably especially find that the case today because today's project is all about building on embellishing the last project, which was a drawstring backpack. Now that you've mastered making a drawstring backpack, I felt like it was time to get a little creative. So there are a lot of different ways that you can personalize your project, use your imagination to really make it more customized and more your own. I'm going to show you 3 different ways today, but the possibilities for personalizing a drawstring backpack are endless. At this point, you really get into the crafting end of the sewing spectrum. Honestly, you could add like beads or shells or, paper clips. You could add rocks. You could add curtain rings. Honestly, you can get a little crazy with it. But today, I'm going to show you 3 variations, 3 things you can do to personalize your drawstring backpack that will not only make it that much cooler, but will also build your sewing skills in the process. And those ways are, number 1, we're going to add trim. Number 2, we're going to add a pocket. And number 3, we're going to add lining. Honestly, even within that, there is so much variation. I can't even count the number of pocket styles. They haven't even all been invented yet. I mean, you could invent your own pocket, honestly. It could be a pocket on a pocket on a pocket. Okay, it could just blow your mind of creativity. But I'm gonna show you one and then you're off to the races. It is your creativity, people. You're on your own. Okay, fine, I'll show you 2 pockets. 2, that's all. Don't even get me started on trim. 1 trim, that's all you get. 1. Okay, 2. Today we'll be working with this really cool Gucci-like ribbon, as well as applying this beautiful lace. And here's the list of components we'll be covering in today's video. Let's add this cool looking ribbon to a drawstring bag. You'll notice that I've pressed down the center of the fabric, creating a line where I plan to place the ribbon. You can do this in several ways. You can measure and mark, or you can use an iron and press a line like I've done here. Match the ribbon to the line, find the middle of the ribbon, and pin in place. I like to start at the top and then pin at the bottom, and then find the center and pin in the center, and then pin on either side and fill in as necessary. When you're dealing with different colors on the top and on the bottom, choosing thread is really important. In this case, we're going to have a yellow edge of a ribbon on top of a brown piece of fabric underneath. To make this look right, so you don't have a mismatched color of thread along that yellow edge of the ribbon, or a mismatched color thread underneath on the brown part, you're going to need to thread your machine with both threads, with the yellow thread on the thread spool and the brown thread in the bobbin, as you see here. It may seem like a lot of extra effort to match your threads this way, but this small step can mean the difference between your project looking really great or super homemade. It's something anyone can do, and trust me, it's totally worth it. With my thread matched, now it's time for me to sew right along the very edge of my ribbon. Notice that I'm only applying the ribbon to one of the big pieces of the drawstring bag. That's because I haven't yet constructed the drawstring bag. I'm applying the trim before making the bag. Now that is a really important distinction, and it's a mistake you will see me make a little bit later on in this video. Now I'm going to sew up the other side of the ribbon just on that yellow edge. I probably should have clipped the end of the ribbon so that it would match the end of the fabric, but I'll have to do that afterwards. With your ribbon trim applied, you're well on your way to making this awesome bag. But hold on, before we do that, let me show you how to apply lace. It's a very similar process. I didn't pick the easiest one to show you. This is kind of more advanced, but I really wanted to do this project, and so I figured I might as well show it to you, and I'll show you the full project in the next video. Now, why is this lace such a challenge? Well, first of all, the top is scalloped, so it's not really straight, and the second is there's all this fringy stuff on the bottom that can easily get caught in your needle if you're not careful. Let's go through my trims and I'll show you some that are a little easier. Oh no, we're about to open Pandora's box. So here's my trim box, and as you can see, I have a ton of lace and all kinds of little fun things and beaded things, and I love trim. I think it's one of the funnest ways to personalize and take a project to the next level. But a lace like, okay, sorry, that's a collar that I took. See, I removed that from like something else. And won't that be fun to use at some point? Okay, anyway, so here's an example. This one's not the easiest, but it's a lot easier than that last one because it's got a nice straight part here up at the top where you can easily see where you would sew along that edge right there. Down here you'd probably want to secure it on the bottom, but there's only one little fringy thing on the bottom, so this is much easier to sew onto a project. This one here, same deal, even though it doesn't have a straight part at the top, you can definitely see that there's a straight line in the middle. I would just zigzag this, it would be pretty easy. This one here, this one's a doozy, but I really want to use it on the project today, so this is the one we're gonna use. Another little tip, honestly, trims are so expensive. And sometimes if you can go to the thrift store and find a piece of clothing that has really great trim on it, it's almost worth buying it because the trim itself would be more expensive than the article. And that's one cool thing about sewing, is that, you know, sometimes when you come across something that has really great trim, you can salvage it and use it on another project to make your stuff look incredible and not have to pay nearly as much at the fabric store. Another thing to keep in mind with your trim is what it's made out of. While this one is a little easier because it's got a nice line here at the top, it's a little trickier because it's metallic, and so it's gonna be a little sticky, a little harder for your needle to get through. Also, beads, sequins, I mean, keep it in mind, right? I wouldn't do beads or sequins right away. There are ways to get around it if you just have to do that project, but this right here, oh yeah, there are definitely ways of sewing this, and I wouldn't take your needle through anything like this too soon. Not every lace project is going to require you to use the technique I'm about to show you, but this one definitely does. First, you're going to need some Stitch Witchery or iron-on hem tape to secure the lace to your project so it doesn't slide around or move position when you're trying to sew it. Once you have your hem tape, you'll need to measure where that hem tape is going to be secured. In this case, the place where I'm going to sew is up near the top of that lace trim because I want to allow the fringe to fly free. So I'm measuring and I'm pinning to give myself a guide for where I want that hem tape to be placed. Now I'm coming to my ironing board and I'm placing the hem tape right over the pins where I marked, and then putting the lace over the top of that. And then I will place a damp cloth over the top of both of those in order to press it into place. You'll notice that we're applying the lace to a bag that's already sewn so that it will go all the way around. And that is because if we would have applied it to the pieces themselves, then the lace would have gotten sewn into the seams, and it doesn't look right. You'd want to have that lace going all the way around your bag, so you have to have the bag sewn first. Now that I'm finished securing the lace on one side, I'm flipping the bag over and I will secure the lace in the very same way on the other side. Now that I'm done, I will clip the end of the lace, but I will actually leave a little bit so that I can sew both ends together. Make sure you press your seams open. You don't want for that seam to get bulked up underneath when you're trying to sew the lace on. You'll need to remove the free arm for this project, then open the bag and place it around the free arm, finding the top of the lace, and you're going to sew just underneath the scallop. Bury your needle, and now you're going to sew the lace all the way around the bag, working with the fabric, making sure that the bag is not doubling up on itself, so that you're always just sewing the lace onto one piece of fabric underneath the presser foot. Prepare yourself, because when you get to the seam, you'll want to make sure, I usually try to check with my hand to make sure that that seam is pressed open, because I don't want it to be bulked up underneath my lace. This is what you want the seam to look like on the other side after you've sewn it, with the seam pressed open. You can see how I'm reaching underneath to work with the fabric to make sure that that seam is pressed open before I sew on it. I always make sure that I check. Now when I get to the end, I'm going to turn the corner, I'm going to sew down the middle of the lace, and then I will come back the other side, sewing down on the other side of the lace. This is to give it even more stability. This is a very large piece of lace, and so I will want to make sure that I have it secured on both sides of that long strip of lace that you can see. But of course, I'm being very careful to make sure that I'm not getting my needle caught in those tassels that are hanging free. So as you are sewing anything like this, you need to be very careful as you're going along to make sure that your needle is sewing exactly where you want it and not playing around with those really fun tassels right there. So actually that bag is gonna end up looking a little more like this one, only a bit bigger. I will show you that in the next video because we're gonna line it. And I don't wanna show you lining it until the next video. There's just too much to cover. So halfway through this video, I've decided that actually it's not gonna be 3 things. I'm just gonna teach you about trims and pockets on this video. There's like way too much to cover lining in this video too. Next video, lining, but this video, trims and pockets. Yeah, sometimes I get a little carried away. All right, fine. Getting carried away is my MO. And what was your first clue? Maybe climbing in the polar fleece? Sorry everyone, I promise I will get to these. I just didn't want this video to be like an hour long. As much fun as we have together, an hour is just so long. But we do have a little time left in this video, so let's make some pretty pockets for your drawstring backpack. So I'm going to start with this square because a square pocket is probably the most basic pocket style. There are, as I said, millions of pocket styles. But we're going to start here because you'll probably use this style of pocket on an upcoming apron. Not saying that that's necessarily in your future, but yeah, we're going to make an apron and we're going to do this very same style of pocket. And I chose this cute St. Patrick's Day fabric because I know, lucky, the luck of the Irish. That's to wish you good luck on making your pocket. Okay, it's time to get your zigzag on. We're going to finish off all these raw edges before we do anything else on this pocket. Now bring your pocket to the ironing board and press over the top edge of the pocket about 1/4 of an inch all the way along the top edge. When that's done, turn the pocket over and then fold the top edge over again about 1/2 an inch and press. Sew those pressed down edges of the top flap into place, about 1/2 an inch seam allowance on either side, just that top section on both sides. I'm sorry that my camera work is so bumpy in this part. It's making me a little seasick. Honestly, I was holding the camera as I was sewing, and I've never done that before, holding a camera while sewing at the same time. I feel like it was kind of talented of me. When you're done sewing, bring the pocket back to the ironing board, and we're going to clip the corners. Do not clip the seam you just sewed, but clip the little corners so that it will turn out very appropriately. There you can see how to clip those corners. Now we're going to turn that flap inside so that you're creating a flap. I'm using my scissors just very carefully to point those corners out. Now I'm going to press that top pocket flap all the way down. That's the top of the pocket. It's a little flap that you will sew down. This is the pocket edge. And then I'm going to press down about 1/2 an inch on each of the other pocket sides. There at the bottom, you'll just be pressing up over the press that you already made on either side. But that flap, you turned inside out, and so it will have a nice corner already made by having sewn there, and there's like a little seam on the side, and that's because it's the flap. When you're finished ironing, each pocket edge will be folded over about 1/2 an inch. Sew a top stitch hem on the top edge flap of the pocket. When you're getting ready to pin the pocket to one piece of the drawstring backpack, you need to find the center. I'm going to show you a really complex way of doing that. Fold the fabric in half, and that will give you a center line. And then you can fold your pocket in half, and that will give you a center line as well. And then you can match the two and then you'll make sure that your pocket is in the center. Of course, you can also measure, but that's not as cool as this like cheater way. Pin the pocket to one piece of the drawstring backpack, making sure to leave the top flap free because you're going to want to put things in the pocket, and if you sew it down, it'll just be like a patch, not a pocket. So make sure to only pin around those 3 edges that don't have the flap. Now, put that pocket underneath your machine and sew along the edges that you pinned. I would do a small top stitch hem about 1/8 of an inch close to the edge. When you get to the end, turn the corner and come back the other direction to make another row of stitching about 1/4 of an inch or a little more from the edge. I usually use my presser foot as a guide to make sure that I have 2 equal rows of stitching. When you're finished, your pocket will look a little like this one. It's such a pretty pocket. And it makes a really cute drawstring bag. I promised you 2 pocket styles. Let's go. Now let's sew a heart pocket. Pockets and shapes. Oh yeah, it's super cute. I mean, that was the whole idea behind those apple bottom jeans. Did you ever even see those? Yeah, it's not just a song. They actually existed. Okay, the first thing you want to do is cut out 2 hearts and put these guys right sides together. We're going to sew all the way around. Go ahead and start pinning anywhere like around the top, but we are going to eventually need to leave one of the sides a little bit free for turning. So that means we're not going to actually sew all the way around the heart. We're going to leave a little opening. I usually like to take my red pins to remind me where to start and where to stop. So there's a red pin and I'm going to put that in one place, and then I'll take another red pin and place it maybe 1 inch, 1.5 inches. There we are. I leave like a couple inches of space for turning, and then I'm going to pin the rest of the way around the heart. There's my space for turning, and now I'm going to finish pinning the rest of the way around. I will start sewing at that first red pin, and then I'll stop at that second red pin. I want to leave about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance and make sure that I turn the corner when I get to the bottom of the heart. You're going to practice sewing around a curve. It gets a little curvy here. Definitely need to work with that fabric to get all the way around the curve. And then it's a little bit tricky when you get to the point of the heart. That is turning a corner. So a heart, you get to practice both sewing on a curve and going around a corner as well. So here we go, and I'm going to stop when I get to that other red pin. . Now, as a bonus, you're going to learn another super important skill that you're going to be using a lot, and that's called grading the seam allowance. So here you go, here's the seam, and anytime you have a curve like this, especially if you're going to turn it inside out like we're about to do, if you don't grade the seam, it's going to make your seam allowance look all kind of weird and not straight. So if it's a point, a corner, or a curve, you're going to want to grade that. And so this is what we're going to do. We're going to grade these seam allowances. Watch. What you're doing when you're grading a seam allowance is you're reducing the bulk of the seam. So you're basically cutting notches in the fabric, but you have to be very careful not to cut the stitching of your seam. So you cut as close to the seam as you can without actually cutting the stitching that you just made. And make sure that you cut to the point of the heart. Otherwise, it's just not going to turn out very well. It won't turn out correctly, and you'll get a lot of bunching and puckering there at the point of the heart. So this is a really important process to make this turn out well. And I'm just going to be cutting basically all the way around the heart, just little notches in the fabric, reducing that bulk. Make sure to clip off the point of the heart as well, but don't clip the stitching. And there you are. Now you know how to grade a seam allowance. When you're done, it will look something like this. And I made these funny lines for you, mainly because you cannot see the white stitching, but also because I wanted to make sure that you knew not to cut your stitching when you're grading your seams. I like to use the eraser part of a pencil to help me turn things inside out. Find the hole that you left from sewing and push the fabric through. Then use the eraser of a pencil to help poke out all of those edges, and you'll need to work with it a little bit to make sure that the seam is poking out all the way so that you get a really good heart shape. It does take a little bit of manipulation and work to get it right. Bring your heart pocket to the ironing board and press, including the space that you left. Make sure that you fold those edges in and press. It takes a little bit of manipulation and a little bit of work. I usually will, with my fingers, kind of pull on those edges to make sure that the seam is poking all the way out as I press. Get ready. This is where I made my big mistake in the order of operations. I really should have applied this pocket before sewing the bag, but I didn't. I sewed the bag first, and now I'm going to have to remove the free arm so that I can apply the pocket the same way I applied that lace, which is way more complicated and a lot harder than if I would have just simply been smart and sewed the pocket on before sewing the bag. I mean, it's not like you can't do it, but just look, that is way harder than it needed to be. Once you've figured out where you want this pocket to be, that's kind of cute. Maybe I like it there or there. No, I think right there. There? No, there. There we go. Then you need to make sure that you're leaving the top free, because again, if you want it to be a pocket and not a patch, you need to leave an opening in the top for things to go in. So we're gonna pin all the way around the pocket except for that top edge that we want to leave open for the pocket. With the free arm removed, now it's time to do something that's unnecessarily difficult and sew this pocket into place inside the bag. Again, it's not that it can't be done. I mean, I'm just about to do it. It's just that doing things in the wrong order of operations or doing them out of order makes things a lot more difficult than they needed to be. And I would definitely recommend doing things in the right order, including my videos. So if you haven't watched all of my videos, go back to the beginning and make sure that you're not skipping any steps. Or you might be in the same situation I'm in right now, trying to sew inside of a bag, making sure that I'm not getting both sides of the bag at the same time. Oh, please don't ever do that. I mean, you can seam rip it out, but it's so much easier to do it the right way from the beginning. When you get to the end, you can either stop and leave it as it is, or you can do like I'm going to do, go back to the beginning on the other side and do another row of stitching. I use my presser foot as a guide, so I'm getting about a 1/4 inch space in between both rows of stitching. If you're ever so unfortunate to be sewing inside of a bag like I am here, you have to feel the fabric as you go around, being very careful not to be stitching through more than just the top layer of the bag. You don't want to be sewing through both layers of the bag at once, otherwise you're sewing the bag shut. So you have to be very careful and feel the fabric as you go along to make sure that you're only sewing the pocket to that top side of the bag. And it'll look like this with an opening at the top. And there's the 2 rows of stitching you can see. Maybe I'm a little biased, but I think everyone would want one of these for their special Valentine. Let's not forget, the best part of a drawstring backpack is everything you put in it. So why a variation on our last project rather than getting you started on a new project? My goal is not just to teach you how to sew, but teach you how to be creative. I'm hoping to give you a lot of tools that you can use to set your mad, creative, wild genius inside of each and every one of you free, to take over the world with all of your incredible creative plans and plots. And personally, I think that most of you would do a better job ruling the world at this point than most of the people who are currently ruling the world. So, rule the world with your sewing mad skills. I actually feel like I'm doing the world a service by setting you all loose and allowing the world to be beautified with sewing. And lucky sewing. While some may question the usefulness of a shamrock drawstring backpack, you and I both know that without one, how would you ever find the treasure? Or have a place to keep it? Or save it from the leprechauns? That alone is saving the world one sewing project at a time.